Well, first things first, Catherine, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I imagine a book like this was a labor of love for you to put together.
It really was just from seeing my own kids grow up and the struggles they've had and friends and neighbors, but also the many hundreds of calls I've had from parents who are struggling and need help. They need advice.
There are so many questions and issues when it comes to kids being online, digital parenting, the risks that come from having a fully connected digital device in your hand all the time. What made you decide to target the concept of, first phone?
So I think the truth of the matter is, we've tried to protect kids from access for a long time. But even if your kid doesn't have a phone, they probably have an iPad. And if they don't, all of their friends do. So we cannot protect our kids anymore. We have to learn to educate them instead, and help so that they can make good decisions when they're on their own away from their parents. And I think at the time of getting their first phone is a great entry point.
I'm sure you have a lot of parents who ask you this question. Hey, my kid's been asking for a phone. What's the right age to give them a phone? I know that there is maybe no such thing as a right magical age, but what's your answer when a parent asks you, hey, what's the right age to give my kid their first phone?
So I think we used to try and wait as long as possible, but I actually don't think that's such a great idea. By the time the kids are 13, 14, they don't want you in their business as much. 11, 12-year-old, it's a great time because they're very open to communicating with you. They don't mind you being in their phone to monitor and help them learn. So I think that's a better age. And also, it really depends on the family. Some kids have an actual need for a phone. It could be a health reason. Maybe their parents are divorced, someone's in the military, they're going to be home alone. So there are a lot of good reasons where someone might need a phone earlier.
But looking at your book, you cover so many different issues when it comes to having a phone, whether it is digital safety, whether it is not going to the right website, cyberbullying, sexting you cover. What would you say are the top 3 or 4 most pressing issues that parents should be aware about when they're making that consideration about, keeping their kids safe when they get their phones?
For sure, scams, phishing, predators is a very high on the list for parents, and educating kids about what a scam looks like. These people are very highly skilled at getting information and getting access, and it's hard for adults. So I think it's even harder for kids to recognize. And I also think social media is a very top concern, because we know research is coming out how it is affecting our kids' self-esteem, anxiety, depression. These things are really increasing in our kids, and so it's very important that we address some of those concerns and not just like give a phone and hope for the best.
Who would you say this book is for?
So I wrote it for kids so that they can learn for themselves. But it is, in my opinion, a gift to parents because this is such a complicated issue. It took me a lot of research and organizations to write it. And so, the average parent doesn't have time for this, but they care deeply about these issues. So for me, it's to be read by the kids, but it can be read with the kids and the parents. I have a little section in the back for parents, and I hope that parents, get involved with their kids because digital education is really a lifelong endeavor.
Well, I thought it was clever the way that you used characters that hopefully most kids can relate to, can access to tell this story through their lens, whether it's their experiences texting, cyberbullying, taking a picture that they shouldn't, getting on social media. What clued you in on going that direction, taking that approach?
So kids don't want to hear from a parent. They have parents. They want to hear from kids. So I try to integrate, my sort of expert opinion as a parent, and an educator with real life kids talking. And these are conglomerate kids, but they're meant to be identifiable to all kids. Hopefully they all find some commonality with these kids. And those kids are talking about the real life, the things that actually happen to kids, not some parent, giving them warnings. So I felt like it was important to have both my voice and the voices from these 5 kids.
I want to get into just some of the issues that you talked about, in the book, some of the things that you addressed. One of them was parental monitoring. You introduced that idea fairly early on that, hey, your mom and dad most likely will have access to your phone. They'll be able to check in on you. I know for a lot of parents and a lot of kids, that might feel like snooping, but I've heard a lot of experts say you kind of set that boundary at the beginning that, hey, I have access to this phone too. Why do you think that's so important?
So I think it's not so that we can be punitive with our kids, like you should not have done this. It's so we can educate them. And I think if parents take the tone of this is all learning process. You're going to make mistakes. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to punish you or shame you for what you've done. I think kids are much more open about letting their parents in, and it doesn't feel like snooping. It's like, I'll do it in front of you. Hey, let's look through your social media, or it's not even what your kid is posting. It's what is suggested for them. What videos are coming up for them? Who are they following? What comments are they seeing? All of those things are conversation starters. And so I think if we can rebrand the looking and as education instead of snooping, I think it can change the dynamic a little bit.
Well, I think what's hard for so many parents is the vast majority of us did not grow up with this kind of access, with a device like this in our hands at all times. We didn't grow up with the constant dopamine rush that the dings and the likes and the favorites all bring about. So this is something where we're having to navigate uncharted territory for many of us. It feels like we're learning to do this as our kids are learning to do it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I think parents should be involved with their kids and be kind of like, this is a two-way street. I don't know everything. There are some things you know so much more about. And then when parents can approach it with an open mind, they can actually learn what's really going on for their kids. There's only so much we can know, but as parents, we do have the benefit of research. We have the benefit of what's on the news. So we can be a bit more informed. So I think we can add to the conversation, even if we don't know technically all the things that the kids do know.
I think one of the difficult parts for parents to wrap their heads around too are some aspects that kids are going to experience on their phones are things that we've seen for time immemorial. You know, whether bullying is a great example. You know, kids have bullied each other. That's not new. It's the new ways that they're doing it. And I know that recent research suggests that, especially over the course of the pandemic, we've seen a rise in those incidents. How much is making the kids aware of those threats, part of your goal, and how much of it's making parents aware of what to be on the lookout for?
Honestly, in this area, this is something for the kids because parents aren't going to be involved. They're not going to know half the time when there's cyberbullying going on. And even just a mean comment, I tried to broaden the idea of what cyberbullying is to give kids a better idea of what we're talking about. It isn't always the obvious, kind of bullying that we typically talk about. But I think that it's really for the kids to get in there and know, how am I going to be kind? How can I be an upstander when I see something, not just go along or not just not say something? How can I actively help to prevent some of the cyberbullying that's going on? Because it's subtle. And also with bullying in person, there's only limited amounts of time. There's adults around, it's much harder. It's very easy to get bullied online. It takes 2 seconds. Nobody's around. Nobody sees it. There's no social contract that says this isn't cool. So I think it can happen much more often. I think that's why we're seeing an increase.
I loved the documentary, The Social Dilemma, that talks about just one for anybody on social media. Again, that dopamine rush, that constant drip of stimulation that comes from social media, the new pictures, the likes, the favorites, like I mentioned before. But I know there's been some research about the effect it has on younger adolescent and teenage brains, specifically, that they're not as well equipped to handle that experience as adults might be. And I'm not sure we're well equipped either. What has been your insight into how social media and just that online experience can affect kids specifically?
So kids can't really understand that this isn't real life, even though we can say it over and over again. It's what they see everywhere, and it's in front of them all the time. And so they have a hard time discerning that this is made up. This was 100 pictures to get this one picture. This is angles and modifications and filters. And then what happens is they see all these beautiful pictures and these beautiful vacations, and then they look in the mirror, and nobody can compete with that. But I think the adult brain has a better idea of saying, oh, okay, that was photoshopped, or, oh, okay, that's an angle. Whereas kids just say, oh, I'm not as pretty as that, or I don't have as nice things as that. And it really takes a toll, especially in adolescence where your body is changing and you're going through so many emotions and puberty. It's very hard on your self-esteem on a good day, but then you add in social media and all these beautiful, perfect pictures. And I think it's very clearly affecting kids' self-esteem, especially girls.
One area that you touched on in the book, sexting and the taking and sharing of inappropriate pictures. And for a lot of parents, that is, I think, a topic you want to stick your head in the sand about, kind of close your eyes and close your ears and just pretend it's not happening. And I know that it's difficult because you have some of the same aspects of self-exploration and awakening to romantic feelings that, again, like bullying, we've had for forever, but it's doing so in a way that can be really damaging long term. What's been the response from other parents that you've talked to about this topic? Have they been open to discussing it, or what's that been like for you?
I think parents feel relieved to have a way to talk about this. It's happening. Their kids are doing it. They're receiving these texts. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of the way that kids flirt these days, and that's their avenue for flirting. They have less in-person interactions, and so I think parents know it's there, but they have no idea how to address it. So I think the more that there's resources for parents and for kids, I think it helps kind of break that down. And I also think we have to approach it with kids as we understand the impulse, we understand why this is happening, and not to shame kids for it, but to kind of understand why it's happening, but then to explain the reasons why we really don't want to do it. The long-term effects.
I think, and I can't speak for other parents, but I know something that's been helpful for me, at least in our household, is to expect that the proverbial lines will get crossed, that this is, a situation where instead of, hoping and our fingers crossed that our kid will never see something he's not supposed to see or never have an interaction. It's more like, okay, how do we handle it when that inevitably happens? So what is your response to parents when they find out my kid's got this phone, he's seen something he shouldn't have, he sent a picture he shouldn't have, visited a website that we would prefer he not have, etc.? How should parents approach those situations?
So 100% these situations are going to happen for every parent. And my biggest advice is to not freak out. Your first reaction is going to want to just really be very upset, visibly, to condemn your kid, to condemn the kid who sent it or did the thing. But I really recommend parents not do that, because then immediately your kid goes underground. That's the last time you're going to hear about anything. And what we want is foster communication. And again, like you said, to accept there are going to be mistakes. I make mistakes too online. I know an adult who just fell for a scam as well and lost half her money. I mean, these are real things that happen to people. So we can't be ashamed about it. We have to be able to openly talk about it. And the first thing when parents get very overblown responses, the kids just shut down, and that's the end of it. So I love your idea of, letting kids know there'll be big mistakes. That's okay. We can always talk about it. And I promise to remain calm and help you sort through it.
Well, and a big part of what you're talking about at the end of the day is communication. It's having those lines of communication open. And I feel like that's a message that you've got to hammer in no matter how old someone's kids are, because it's not like you've got a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, they get a phone and all of a sudden you're going to have these amazing lines of communication that you haven't had before. That's got to go back. That has to be a foundation you've laid a long time ago.
I think it should be, honestly, with kids in kindergarten, we should be talking about digital education on the most basic levels, because they're all doing research on their computers for, the biggest bug in the world or whatever it may be. So I think we have to start early, and then it should be the norm that we always talk about these things. I love bringing in the news into conversations, because then it's like a real life example. It's not just a parent saying, oh, this is a danger. They can talk about things that really happen. And honestly, digital education, it's a lifelong endeavor for all of us. Adults have to continue to learn, or they're going to fall prey to something that they wish they didn't. So I think we should expect that for our kids and make sure that it's normal that we keep going for the rest of our lives with this kind of education.
I think it is easy to make phones, being online, social media networks, all of these things, screen time, to make them like they're the big boogeyman. We're afraid of them. They're these, dangerous, unknown lands for, again, the parents that didn't grow up with access to these, or that have had it and seen what can happen out there. But I think you take efforts in the book to really show a balanced perspective of why people want to be on social media networks, how powerful a phone can be, what a great tool it is, how screen time is not all created equal. So there's a bit of a demystification that's necessary there as well, it seems like.
Absolutely. I mean, phones are wonderful on so many levels. There's so many examples, and I try to start the book that way so that we can realize it's life-saving. The phone, it gives us creative outlets. There are all kinds of mental health apps, ways to communicate with people far away. I was just speaking to a mom whose husband is in the military, and they FaceTime, and that's like an absolute miracle of modern technology that they can do that. So there are so many wonderful things that phones can do, and I think we could enjoy all of those, but also at the same time talk about the dangers. We don't have to make it all or nothing, because it's the reality for our kids. Regardless, if we can see the good sides, it's just the way it is. So we might as well enjoy it and use the good sides, but also be mindful.
You and I talked before about, my personal exposure to some of these topics. Being a parent, my wife works in a field that touches on a lot of these. I think the hardest part of your book to read in a lot of ways was the one that talked about parents having to model good behavior, where we're not buried in the phone all day long, because at the end of the day, the kids are going to pick up some of those habits that mom and dad have. And that's difficult. Maybe the reason we know that these devices are so powerful is because some of us have succumbed to the power of them as well. But it seems like at the end of the day, maybe if you take anything away, it's that parents also need to model the kind of behavior they want to see from their kids.
Yeah, no parent wants to hear that they need to be a better role model for their kids digitally, partly because it is so difficult. These devices are set up to, get our attention and to keep our attention, and they do. And parenting is hard. So I try not to like point fingers and shame parents. Like, I get why you're on your phone, but then I know that parents get very upset later on when they can't get their kids' attention. So I try and help them understand you have to model some of the good behavior that you want to see, and some minimal behavior like no phones at mealtime, or we don't sleep with their phones. You don't have to model all good behavior, but some of these super important ones that you think you really need for your kids to absorb.
Yeah, not driving while you're using your phone, that kind of thing. Uh,
Yes, please.
I'm sure you would love to sell as many copies of your book as possible, but when it's all said and done, what is your hope for the book? What impact are you hoping that it might have?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I loved writing this book. I know that it's needed. I've spoken to so many kids and parents about this. So like my hope is it actually helps educate kids, and they feel more competent and in control of managing their digital device, whatever it is, and that parents feel like they have a tool that they can use. I mean, that's really the hope.
Well, I think you did something pretty special. I hope it's a big hit, and I think it's something that, like you said before, kids can access. It speaks to them on their level. It's not written in a way that talks down to kids, but I think it's written in a way that again makes them feel understood. And then there's enough in there for parents as well to have an understanding of, hey, here's some of the things to think about when my kid almost inevitably gets that first phone.
Yeah. Thank you so much.